The final four parshias of the Torah, Nitzavim, Vayelech, Chazinu, V'zos HaBracha, describe for us the last day in the life of Moshe Rabbeinu and spell out his final legacy for all future generations. At the end, of course, he gives them V'zos HaBracha. He gives everyone a bracha, min hashamayim. He blesses Klal Yisrael tribe by tribe. But before he does that is Parshas Nitzavim. And Nitzavim is about something quite unique and pivotal in the life of Klal Yisrael. Atem Nitzavim hayom kulchem lifnei Hashem Elokeichem. Moshe Rabbeinu says, you are all standing here today. And incidentally, the word Nitzavim isn't just standing as opposed to sitting or running. Nitzavim means to stand firm and immovable, and to stand to attention, and to report for duty. In fact, in modern Hebrew, when you report to the army, there's l'hityatzev. That is the Torah word which means to stand firm. We find it, for example, where Klal Yisrael are at Yam Suf, and they have the sea in front of us, and the galloping Egyptians behind them, and Moshe Rabbeinu has to say to them, Hisyatzavu u'ru'u es Yeshuas Hashem. Stand firm. Don't be afraid. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will fight for you. Hashem yilochem lochem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will fight for you. We find it also at Har Sinai. It says, Vayisyatzvu b'sachti sahar. They stood at the mountain of Har Sinai, Nitzavim. Nitzavim standing tall and proud and certain and immovable. And similarly here, at the end of his life, Moshe Rabbeinu says, Atem Nitzavim hayom kulchem. Here you are, standing firm, on the verge of going into Eretz Yisrael, after 40 years in the Midbar. And now I've got something that I want you to do. What is that? The Pasuk says, La'ovrucha bivris Hashem Elokecha. I want you to accept upon yourself a brit, a covenant with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Asher Hashem Elokecha karesim cho hayom. Today HaKadosh Baruch Hu is making with you a covenant. And the question really, if one wants to have a look at this and understand it a bit deeper, the question asked by the Malbim and the Kli Yakar and the Abarbanel, all the Mefarshim want to know, what is the uniqueness of this particular covenant? We've had covenants all the way through the whole Chumash. In fact, the covenants began before the Jewish people began. The first covenant was with the rainbow, the Keshet Ba'anan, with Noach. HaKadosh Baruch Hu made a covenant not with the Jewish people, but with mankind. And in response, Noach accepted upon himself the Sheva Mitzvot B'nei Noach, the 7 Noachide laws, which is the fundamental moral code of mankind. That was the first Brit. Then we have the Bris of Avraham Avinu, which was the Bris Milah. And that was a much more lios l'cha le'elokim, a personal connection between Avraham Avinu and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the content of that bris, if you have a look at Rashi, very beautifully, Rashi, the Lashona HaZahav of Rashi, is that Rashi says, what's the content of this bris? Al ha'ahava. The covenant was about the mutual love between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Jewish people, as described in Shir HaShirim. That love, ani l'doidi v'doidi li, I mention this because we're in Elul, and this is the love that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has for Klal Yisrael, which is heightened at certain times of the year. But Rashi doesn't just say al ha'ava. Rashi says the bris milah was al ha'ahava v'al ha'oretz. It was a covenant about the land of Eretz Yisrael, la'achuzat olam, the Pasuk says, as an eternal inheritance. So you have first with mankind, then with Avraham Avinu, a personal connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and to Eretz Yisrael. Then the third covenant is Bris Sinai, the covenant of Kabbalah HaTorah. And that is, of course, the acceptance of the mitzvahs, Nasa v'Nishma. So we've already had 3 Britot. So now we're coming to the end of the Chumash, and Moshe Rabbeinu says, Atem nitzavim hayom la'avrucha b'bris Hashem Elokecha. What is this new covenant? Right? And this new covenant turns out to be something exceptionally important. But what is really new here that wasn't really emphasized previously in accepting the covenant between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu? So there's some very interesting elements here in this covenant. One of them is that what is emphasized is that the covenant isn't just with the people who are standing in front of Moshe Rabbeinu or listening to him. This covenant is Eis Asher Yeshno Po Imonu Hayom, Lifnei Hashem Elokecha, V'Eis Asher Einenu Po Imonu Hayom. Moshe Rabbeinu is making a covenant for them and saying, I want you to take upon yourself the responsibility that this covenant is not only obligating you, but obligating all your future descendants. In other words, all future generations of Klal Yisrael, you and me included, we are all obligated by that covenant, by that acceptance that Moshe Rabbeinu demanded of Klal Yisrael in Parshas Nitzavim. From the beginning of time till the end of time. In fact, there's a very beautiful Hasidic insight into one paragraph here, which I find very fascinating. And that is, in the beginning, Moshe Rabbeinu makes a whole list of who is standing here today. Roshechem, Shiftechem, Ziknechem, V'Shaitrechem, all the different leaders. Kol Ish Yisrael, Tapchem, Neshechem, the children, the women, the Ger Hashem B'Sharecha. And then he says, Mechotev Eitzecha ad She'ev Meimecha. From the choppers of the wood until the drawers of the water. Now, chopping wood and drawing water were classic menial jobs in the ancient world. Everybody needed firewood, everybody needed water, and there were people who chopped the wood and drew the water. But what's unusual here in this pasuk is you would have thought the pasuk would say, from the leaders who are at the top of the pile, until the lowest people, the manual workers in Klal Yisrael, who are chopping wood and drawing water. But he doesn't say that. It says, Mechotev Eitzecha ad Shoev Meimecha, from the choppers of the wood till the drawers of the water. But surely choppers of wood and drawers of water are in the same category. What does it mean from them till then? So I saw something very beautiful which highlights this aspect of the covenant that I'm talking about now. The aspect that this was really, the emphasis is that it's for all future generations. Said one of the great Hasidic Rebbes, and I've forgotten which one it was, he said, who was the Chotev Eitzecha? The Chotev Eitzecha, the chopper of wood, was Avram Avinu at the Akedah. By Yevaka Atzei Ola. It says about Avram Avinu that he chopped the wood and he took it with him to the up the mountain to the Akedah. So that is Avram Avinu by Yevaka Atzei Ola. Who is the drawer of water? That's Eliyahu HaNavi. Eliyahu HaNavi in Melachim Aleph chapter 18, the famous story, the Haftarah of Parshas Kisisa, where Eliyahu HaNavi brings a korban on Har HaKarmel, and in order to emphasize the miraculous nature, before he asks HaKadosh Baruch Hu to consume the korban through fire from heaven, he first pours water over the korban. 4 jugs of water, filled and poured, and then filled and poured, and 3 times, in order to completely drench and soak all the wood and all the parts of the animal to be sacrificed were all completely immersed in water. He was drawing the water and pouring it on. So he says, the Pasuk here is giving us a remez, that this covenant is Mechotev Eitzecha, from Avraham Avinu, the beginning of Jewish history, till Eliyahu HaNavi, the end of Jewish history. The Eliyahu HaNavi will come, and will bring us, herald the news of Mashiach. So from the beginning till the Geula, this covenant is in effect, that every member of Klal Yisrael is committed to it. Incidentally, some of the Mepharshim, the Kliyaka, the Abarbanel particularly, are interested in the mechanics of this. Because, for example, in Hilchos Nedorim, if I make a neder, I can't make a promise which obligates my children. How are they obligated by my Nedorim? So what is going on here that one generation can accept a covenant which will obligate all other generations? So there are various different lines of thought on this. One of them is the mystical idea brought down in the Medrash that actually Eis Asher Yeshno Po Imonu Hayom means all the neshamas of all future generations were in some sense present at the accepting of this covenant. Now this was accepted by you and me. Everybody accepted it at that time. It wasn't like a neder which was simply made by one person, but it was accepted upon Klal Yisrael, who were actually present in some sense mystically of the word present. They were present. The Malbim takes a slightly different line, and he says there is a principle in halacha of zochin le'odom shelei b'fonov, that you can acquire something on behalf of somebody else, even if he doesn't know about it, if it is a complete zechus for him. if it's a tremendous benefit to him, if somebody comes to you and says, I want to give so-and-so $1 million, right? Will you accept it on his behalf? You can accept it on his behalf, even if he doesn't know about it at all. And the minute you accept it, it belongs already to the recipient. And that is the concept of Zochin Odom Shlei B'Forum, says the Malbim, where that generation accepted on our behalf this eternal covenant with the Ribono Shel Olam of infinite value, and therefore they were certainly allowed to do so. The Sforno, just finally, has got also another interesting line on this, which is that it's true I can't make a neder to obligate my children, but I can bequeath to my children a Yerusha, inheritance, al tanai. I can say, I'm giving you this property on condition that you do X, Y, Z. You can attach a condition to a Yerusha. And therefore he says it's Eretz Yisrael is the Yerusha, that this generation was acquiring Eretz Yisrael. This generation is going to be the generation of Kibush Haaretz, of transforming Eretz Canaan into Eretz Yisrael. You're acquiring this, and you're going to bequeath it to later generations, al tanai, on the condition of keeping this bris, this covenant of Torah and mitzvahs and avodas Hashem. That is the content of this bris. And I think this is just an amazing moment in the life of Moshe Rabbeinu. And since we're Erev Rosh Hashanah, I'd just like to mention that, of course, on Rosh Hashanah itself, we say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Zochreinu l'tova. When we say Zochreinu l'tova, we mean remember us. We don't need to tell HaKadosh Baruch Hu to remember us. Ein shichcha lifnei kisei kavaydecha. Everything is remembered by HaKadosh Baruch Hu totally. But we say to him, no, Zochreinu l'tova b'yom hazikaron hazeh. That Rosh Hashanah is a day where HaKadosh Baruch Hu remembers us at our best moments. We've had weaker moments and we've had better moments. Our best moments were the moments when we were standing, receiving the covenant, Atem Nitzavim Hayom Kulchem, that we were receiving the covenant from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Avraham Avinu accepted the covenant, Moshe, and ultimately the whole of Klal Yisrael accepted the covenant with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore, at the crucial moment in the middle of the Musaf, Shmona Esra, we say the Ki Bracha Baruch Atah Hashem, Zoicher Habris, that you should remember that we are those people who were at that covenant. And because we were at that covenant, you committed yourself to protect us, to save us, Eretz Yisrael, and future generations, and Yehi Rotzen, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should give us, please, the forthcoming year, Tovshin Pei Vav, a year of Geula, a year of Yeshua, and a year where HaKadosh Baruch Hu protects us from all the difficulties and sufferings and the anti-Semitism and the hatred, and all that should be that the Kol HaRisha Kulo Ka'oshon Tichle. It should all blow away like a puff of smoke. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu should Zocher Habris, remember this covenant that we remember and he remembers, and that is at the heart of Klal Yisrael. We should all have a Ksiva Chasim B'Teva and a good gebenched Yah. Amen.